I didn't have Alan's foresight about what was going to happen during the storm, nor do I have the stories that Allison has. And usually when I stand up and talk about the STS program, I kind of get up in this very professorial way. I say, okay, here's what the STS program is, and here's why it's good for you. But today I'd like to come at this from a slightly different direction. Right? This is my studio apartment, and I was laying right there in my bed when the surge came and knocked off the electricity. I live across the street from Columbus Park. What I did after the electricity went off is that I went and I watched these beech trees blow out of my window. And I thought, you know, this isn't that bad. Like, the wind wasn't that bad, no problem. And I wasn't the only one who thought that. Young people in my building came down to the stoop, and they smoked cigarettes and drank beer, and they just watched the sky. And then one of them said, they yelled out, you know, they told us this hurricane was supposed to be something. So the next day I wake up and I make breakfast, and my most burning desire is there's some email that I have to write. And I have to get up here to campus because I don't have power, but I got to get this email off. I've never remembered what the email was. Because what happened was I left my apartment, I ran down Clinton Street, I turned up 9th Street, and 9th and Willow was a pond. And I kept walking on a bit, and all of a sudden I realized, you know, here's basement apartments, here's street level apartments, totally flooded out. And I started to see, this is what Sandy means. And nothing special about my story at all. It's totally boring. But the reason I tell it is because this is something that happened to many of us. We started in our own small worlds, and then over the next couple days we were dragged out of ourselves when we saw what was going on around us. We became aware of what Sandy meant. And so there's stories and images that we've heard at this point that we'll never forget. So in Staten Island, a mother stopped she was trying to escape, she stopped her truck, she put her 2 children on top of the truck, and a wave just swept them away. Their bodies were found in a field nearby a day or 2 later. And 100 homes in Breezy Point burned, right? And the firefighters were there, but they lacked any ability to do anything about it. I've never been to the Jersey coast, but I know it's a central fixture in many people's lives in this region, and it's devastated. And here in Hoboken, our technological system's flooded, water stranded our people, and then the National Guard showed up, and as Allison recalled, government staff members, reservists, and volunteers like Allison and so many Stevens students and staff members worked very hard to restore our world to what it was. And you guys know all of this. I'm not really telling you anything. This is an image that's come to have a great deal of meaning for me. So I was walking around with Professor Russell one day, and we walked by this pier. Some of you guys might know this pier. It's down on the Hudson here in Hoboken. And there's a really cool jungle gym over to the right-hand side that you can't see, unfortunately. When I first saw this, I wasn't sure what these white things were. They're styrofoam wedges. They're about 6 feet long, maybe 2 or 3 feet tall. I didn't know what they were doing. But as you can see back here, those styrofoam wedges actually acted as the support for the landscape architecture that is on this pier. So what had happened is the surge came in and it eroded the hill away, and then it dragged these styrofoam wedges out and slammed them against this metal fence. And this has become a kind of metaphor for me. Hurricane Sandy uncovered many things, physical things like these wedges, but they also uncovered things like how innovation happens, how government works, how community comes together, and unfortunately how poverty exacerbates disaster, or the other way around. So here we are at a university. It's our job to try to understand these things, see what's been uncovered, dig further if we need to, and see how we can improve our conditions. So one way I want to try to do this is next semester I'm teaching this class. It has this title named HHS 479, Studies in the History of Technology, but I'm going to call it Sandy Studies. The class has an argument. It's that we can't understand where we are unless we understand where we came from, understand our past. So we're going to be reading a number of histories on disasters in the United States. We'll also be reading some sociological theory to see how groups act under disaster. So there's actually a pretty good literature on the sociology of disaster. We'll eventually need to narrow our focus, but I think the storm has brought so many topics up. And so today, instead of having answers for you, I really have questions that mean a great deal to me. So first off, I want to know how scientists like Professor Bloomberg do their work, and how they have and will be involved in the policy process down the road. I want to know, for instance, why Verizon phones continued to work after the storm, but Sprint and AT&T phones were as good as bricks. Right? They just didn't do anything.
AT&T sucked.
That's one reason. I want to know, this is a picture one of my students, Jonathan Escobar, sent me. He lives in the Heights. This is the substation that was drowned. And I want to know how long it's been there. 1910, 1940? Why would you build a substation under sea level? Well, there's historical reasons for that, and I think it would be interesting to learn what the power grid looks like. I want to know how government responded to disaster. One of the things, the people who were on 11th and Hudson and other people had internet access were using Web 2.0, things like Facebook, to learn a great deal about what was going on. We also saw some kind of grassroots efforts in the area. Some of you guys might have used Hoboken Sandy maps to check where power was when it was being restored. This green just means it's been completely restored. It also showed different things that were being offered through the disaster. Also, I want to understand better how this storm affected the very poor here in Hoboken and in the region. So these are people being helped at the Jubilee Center, which is a part of All Saints Episcopal Church. They and other groups in town work with poor in the southwest part of town. And I want to understand, work with these organizations to understand what that was like. And finally, I want to know how we can change things to ensure that the next time isn't so bad. So we're already hearing discussions at the local, state, and federal level about infrastructure, developing disaster response capabilities, and creating meaningful climate policy, potentially, can we imagine? A few days ago, Governor Cuomo announced that Sandy did nearly $50 billion in damage in this region. How are we going to cope with that? How can we avoid having that much damage in the future? So I want to talk to the students for 1 second who are in the room. This class is very full right now. If you want to take classes like this in the future, we suggest that you enroll in HST 120, Intro to Science and Technology Studies, that'll go over the basic concepts of our field, like systems that Jim talked about earlier, how users innovate under disaster, and such topics, in a kind of a general introduction to our field. I also want to take a moment to talk to some members of our community who may be here in the room. So, is Dave Hayer here? Hi.
Hi.
So, is that right, Hayer?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, so Dave Hayer is actually the guy behind Hoboken Sandy Maps. He ran a team that put these maps together that we found very helpful. I don't want to speak for you, but you're thinking about putting together a crisis camp, right? Which kind of like pools IT and other kinds of technical expertise to respond to disasters. So if you're interested, he's going to be looking for volunteers. If you're interested in that kind of thing, if we have any CS majors in the room, you might want to talk to Dave, and he'll also be posting it on the Hoboken Sandy Maps page, if I know that correctly. I would love for me and my students to talk to you about what it was like using Web 2.0 during this time. Also, the Reverend Jeff Curtis was here earlier, and this is my friend Richard Hogue. They work with the Jubilee Center, and I really want to work with the Jubilee Center and other groups in Hoboken that respond to the poor and to learn how perhaps we can better respond in the future when we have disasters so that things aren't so bad off. Dan Bryan was supposed to be here from the city. Maybe there's other people here from the city, but I hope that we can work with the city as well through the class. And finally, I just want to end for a second by meditating on this image. So, the charging stations that popped up along 11th and Hudson Streets became kind of some of the iconic images of Sandy. And when we look at these pictures, we can just see a lot of objects. So, how old are those stairs? Are they as old as the building is, which was probably built around 1900? Somewhere out of the frame of this photo, miles away, a generator is burning either coal or natural gas, sending electricity through wires, through this house, and into these devices. The devices were probably built somewhere in China or somewhere else in Asia. God knows where the apps and software was developed at. Was it California? Was it Seattle? Was it Taiwan? Was it Boston? But when I look at this picture, I see something else too. When you look at these wires, and they're threatening to become knots like they always do, somewhere on 11th Street or Hudson Street here in Hoboken, someone had a thought, right? They said maybe the people out there need power. And that person ran an extension cord from his or her house out the window or the doorway, down to the sidewalk, and plugged it into a power strip. So, who knows who this person was? Within 2 days, I counted nearly 50 charging stations in Hoboken. Now, we would never think of building these things during our normal everyday life when our systems are functioning properly. But this was an innovation, and it was one driven from the heart, I think. So when I look at this pile of cords, I see the ties of community, kind of social bond. And I think that this storm brought us together, and I hope that we fight in the future to keep that. So, thanks for